All right, so this is Jeff at Big Hairy Dog, and this is a webinar for version 8 Retail Pro. And this is about tech support. So let's dive in and start getting, so obviously I'm start off the top here, the basics, always the basics, the most basic thing with any computer, even version 8, version 9, any version. And Jim, I was getting a little echo, so I muted you back. Just let me know if you want me to unmute you. I can unmute you at any time. The first thing is to reboot the computer, of course. Make sure it's not something simple, right? So I don't need to reboot the computer here for you guys to see that's probably the basic first step for anyone, right? Second, in version 8, RProDB. So let's go play around in version 8 and take a look at RProDB. RProDB is definitely one of the best tools we have in version 8 to handle tech support problems. Now we'll look at it two ways. We'll look at it from the menu here inside version 8, and then we'll look at it separately. So, yeah, I'm running a demo copy on this virtual machine here. So there's version 8, and if we go to Tools, we see that there is RProDB right here on the sidebar menu. And now RProDB does 3 things. So we click on RProDB, you see it checks the files. So RProDB lets us set up the database. That's what its name is, RPro database, RProDB, right? It lets us set field sizes and inventory search functions and receipt indexing. That's what its primary function is. Secondly, it repairs and replaces damaged or missing files. So if we have a problem with a file, it can fix the problem. Very important. Thirdly, it removes locks. So it can actually, if you have a lock and it says there's a problem with Retail Pro, you can go into RProDB and it can say, hey, there's a lock on, do you want me to remove it? And you can say yes. Now, it's very smart. If you're using Retail Pro, it's not going to let you remove the lock. So for instance, let's look at a couple of things here. Let's close it and let it finish its little process. So let's pop back out here. Now, RProDB is, in fact, in the Retail Pro folder. It is an actual file, rprodb.exe, right? So I'm going to go into inventory, right? Yeah, whatever, demo reset. So we're going to go into inventory. We're going to break the rule, right? We're going to be doing what we shouldn't be doing, and then we're going to try and fire off RProDB, and let's see how smart it is. Let's see if it can figure out. So a lock is when we're doing something that we probably shouldn't be doing, like trying to use a workstation license on more than one machine, trying to edit inventory while we're editing system preferences. You can't drive the car and run the engine at the same time, right? So here we are, we're driving the car, and I'm going to go into the configuration tool, RProDB, and it should stop me. It should say, whoa, hey, dude, RPro's in use. Please have all workstations, workstation 1, exit and restart the program. Like, can't pass go, can't collect $200, right? That's it. So it is pretty smart. Now, if, and I don't think I can, let's see if I could, let's try something here, see how tricky I can be today. WS. Okay, so there's our lock file right there. Let's copy this up to the desktop. Paste. Okay, let's exit out of here, right? And let's close this. And let's take this here, copy it, and put it back in here now. Okay, now let's find our RProDB. Let's see if I can fool it fast enough or well enough today. I don't know if we can or not. It's pretty smart. It'll probably catch me, but and we'll give it a shot right here. So RProDB, we go into RProDB. Oh no, see it removed the lock automatically. It did not prompt me to remove locks. I was hoping for the prompt is what I was hoping for, but it did not It did not, it was smarter than that. It just removed the erroneous lock that I manually copied in there, and it said, hey, this isn't real, and it removed it. But there are situations where you can definitely get it to do that. In fact, let me see if I can, maybe I can get it to pop for you. Yeah, cancel changes. Let's go back into Resell Pro. I have gotten the lock removal prompt when I'm playing with practice mode on a number of occasions. So let's try this. Let's go into inventory. So we're sitting in inventory, right? And let's take the RPro folder, and let's take our data. And this is not a bad thing to see anyway if you're into tech support stuff. If you wanted to take all the data files, the critical data files, right? So doc designs, reports, all that setup, right? That's all configuration. But data, DAT files, those things change every day. So if I sort by type, and I scroll down a little bit, I find these things here starting with INI. And I don't need all these INI files. I only need like a few of them, but I just take them all because there's only like a dozen. Then you see the DAT files. DAT files, that's data files. Then you'll see some DIA files. We don't care about those, but they're tiny, so who cares? We grab them. They're temporary network locking files. Then you see IX files. So we want all of the IX files. So IX are index. So we want DAT and IX and INI. And if we copy all those into a backup folder or into practice, we'll populate practice with that data file, right? So now let's go into practice, options, practice RPro. Yeah, whatever. I don't care about the config in practice. What I want to try is I want to try and go into tools, RPro DB in practice. Oh, I see it's still too smart. It's still got me. So I'm not going to get up to that screen that says remove locks, but that's what RPro DB does. Oh, having a hard time reading my screen. Okay, so let me see if I can adjust that for you. Hang on a sec. We can make the screen smaller. Thank you. Appreciate any and all comments that help everybody see what's going on. Let me just do some stuff here. Let's take this down like that, and let me try adjusting that for you. Hang on. Okay, is that better? Now, Brent, good call. Close RPro with Task Manager. Yeah, if you close, oh, I got you. You're saying close RPro with Task Manager. That's a good call. So yes, let's try that, and let's see if that kicks what we're looking for to give us that. Yeah, of course, you have all the answers. All right, so hopefully everybody can see the screen a lot better. And yeah, let's try it. Let's try closing the RPro with Task Manager. So we'll go in. Actually, I don't want to be in practice, really, do I? All right. So let's go into regular, so options, real RPro. Let's go into someplace like inventory, or maybe we should be on a receipt. That might be better. Okay, so we're on a receipt. Got an item on there. And let's take the Windows Task Manager and let's close Retail Pro the non-correct way, like force close Retail Pro while we're in a transaction. Perfect idea. And now in regular here, we're going to go find RPro DB and try to open that up and see what it says here. It still got me. Good try though. It's still. I think it's just because I have only one workstation, so it doesn't ever know that the other ones are in use. So, But normally there's a prompt that'll pop up. It'll just say, other workstations are in use. Do you wish to remove locks? Now, if it's prompting you, it realizes they're not in use. But it sees the lock file that indicates that the workstation's in use, so it prompts you and asks you. You know, it's pretty good, safe setting. Anyway, that's what RPro DB is. And Christy, I do see your phone now, and you are unmuted. All right, so back to Mr. Checklist, right? So Reconstruct. Reconstruct is also on the front line of basic tech support for version 8. So what is Reconstruct? Why do we even have to have it? What's the deal? What's going on with this whole thing? So our files, our data files, okay, are flat files. Well, what's a flat file? Well, a flat file is not unlike a text file. So if I were to just go in and open up Notepad and type something like a DCS code here, and then a vendor code here, and then a description 1 here, and a description 2 here, not separated by anything, right? Just flat, straight out, and then the system would have to know that the first 3 characters of this is devoted to that field, and the next 2 are devoted to the vendor code field, the next 5 are devoted to this description 1 field. Do you follow? So now what they do is they encrypt this. It's not in plain text.
Hello?
So if you were to, yep, we hear you.
Understand. We don't go back. It's been late from the start. It's been a little bit hard for me to feel got up.
You guys are okay? You guys can see the screen okay?
Yes, I did, yes.
Oh yeah, you're unmuted.
There. Huh?
You're unmuted.
Oh, am I?
Yeah. When the phone is green.
I can mute you again. No big deal. It's up to you guys.
Yeah, it's better that you're unmuted actually, or that we are, because then Betty can ask you in real time.
Yeah, that's always nice. Yeah, sure. So anyway, so our files are flat files, right? So that they're just sitting on the hard drive. They're just text files. They're encrypted, but they're flat files. So what does that mean to us? That just means that there's no one watching our back. These files can become corrupted. So if you ever shut down a computer the wrong way, like just powered it off, and then you powered it up and it said, hey, it's going to do a quick scan of the hard drive, and 62% done, blah, 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 waiting for this thing to finish so we can boot, right? Mm-hmm. That process that it does in Windows is the same thing that Reconstruct does. It just checks for a valid file structure. That's all it does. It's checking sector blocks, it's checking the data within the sectors, make sure it's readable. That's all it's doing. So that's Reconstruct. Now, Reconstruct is a separate executable, and it is right here in, if I can get down to the R's, it's right here in, there it is right there, reconstruct.exe. So I could get to this from the main menu, or I could get to this from this executable right here. So if for any reason I'm having trouble getting into Retail Pro at all, like if I try and launch and it gives me an error right here and won't let me get into Retail Pro and it says I have a bad file, just go launch the executable out of the RPro folder, right? You could absolutely run it yourself. All right, so quick run of the demo here. Let's go. So over here in Tools, there's Reconstruct, right? So if I launch it from here, I get the Reconstruct menu, right? And if I close this and we hop back out to the files and we go into the RPro folder and we find the Reconstruct here, there's the reconstruct.exe. We run that, we get the same menu, right? So that's how to get to it and what it does. Now let's just play with how to use it, right? So the Reconstruct tool just does file maintenance. Now, I got crappy files. This is a sandbox. This is just a place where I throw junk and work on it sometimes. So if I wanted to, I could, and I'm not going to do that. I don't want to waste too much time here. We'll just take inventory. So inventory, there's different sections. I can look at all files. I usually leave it on all files, by the way. And if I want, I could type a S to go down to the S files. You see what I mean? I could type an R, whatever. It'll go to any section I want. And then to reconstruct a file, I can start with the basics, right? Okay, so SA is sales. 2017 is the year. The 11 there is the month, right?
Yep.
So SA201711.dat, that is my sales file for my current time period. If it was damaged, that'd be the one probably that was damaged. So, so let's go ahead and move that over here to this side in the selected files where we have three choices: test, index, or full reconstruct. We'll say full reconstruct. We'll click start. We'll click OK, and it'll reconstruct that file. Now, you need exclusive access to the file, meaning no one else can be ringing sales, right? Everybody's got to be out of Retail Pro or at the main menu. They can't be in like a receipt, right?
Yeah.
Now, it takes just seconds to do that. Now, if you wanted to, you could take a section, like a critical section like inventory. You could add all the files with the second button to this thing. You could say, I'd like you to test those files, and have it go test the files to see if there are any that are not up to snuff. So as a proactive measure, right, you could monthly or quarterly, you could stick all your files in there and let it run tests, right, to see how the files are doing. You know, generally speaking, Reconstruct is a reactive tool, right? We get an error, we reconstruct, we fix it. We get an error, we fix it. You could use it proactively. You could be scanning things ahead of time and reconstructing them if they need it in like downtime before you open, 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, this is not an everyday task, really. This is more like a monthly or even quarterly task. You know what I mean? It's not something I would do. I mean, you know, many people go years without ever having to reconstruct anything. So, you know, definitely don't need to worry about that.
Week.
If you want to, once a week, it's not going to hurt you. Let's put it that way.
That's just not, once a month is enough.
Probably, yeah. I mean, you know, what causes a file to become corrupt? Well, a file is a magnetic pattern on a magnetic hard drive, right? So what causes it to become corrupted? Well, sunspots, who knows, right? A magnet in somebody's pocket, a television, the old CRTs we used to have, they had a nice big magnetic field. I don't know. What causes them to become corrupt? The magnetic pattern gets damaged on the hard drive.
Okay.
So it's going to happen, right?
When you reconstruct, does it go all the way back to the beginning or to the last reconstruct?
No, it's not like that. It's not time. It's files. Now, in that, but to bring it back to time, are our sales files all in one file, or are they arranged by month and year?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that I'm not sure.
Right. So if you say reconstruct November of 2017, it reconstructs November of 2017, right?
Oh, okay.
If you say do the whole year, then that means you're saying do January, February, March, April, all the way to November, right?
So you have to specify it.
Right. Well, we'll go back and look at that right now. Now, real quick, though, on the screen, it says files with fatal errors. Now, as far as Reconstruct is concerned, there's only one kind of error, and they're all fatal. Now, obviously, the error, which we'll see in a second, is not fatal. I've been in Retail Pro looking around and making sales and going into inventory. It hasn't stopped me, right?
Right.
So it's not a fatal error. So if we click close, we see that vendor.dat. So vendor.dat right now has a minor level of corruption. Now, not enough to stop us, but if left to fester, eventually it will cause an error, right? So what I would do in testing is I find a file, a critical, and that's a critical, I mean, the vendor file, the inventory file, the department file, those are all critical files, right? Every time you make a sale, you access the vendor database, right? Every time you make a purchase order, I mean, every time you access a record, an item record, you access the vendor database. And that you do every time you make a sale, right? So up here, we would go ahead and change this to full reconstruct. We would say start and click OK. It would reconstruct that file, and boom, done. And it would clear the file. Now the file's been cleared out of the selected box. It's clean. Now, if you are doing a test, if you went in here and said, yeah, I'm going to do a test, I got 2 hours before we open, and I'm going to go answer some email, I'm not going to need RPro for a bit, so I'm going to take all files, and I'm going to start me a test mode, and I hit start and let it go, and it comes back and says you have 120 errors, or 120 fatal errors, right? What that means is somebody went into RPro while you were doing your test. So the Reconstruct tool needs exclusive access to the files. If it gets a sharing violation, it won't know how to express that it's got a sharing violation. It'll just see that as a fatal error.
Okay.
No, nobody has 120 fatal errors, right? That never happens. I mean, yeah, we get a few corrupted files, but I've never seen more than 3 or 4 at a time. So anyway, that's pretty much the Reconstruct tool. You can, if you want to get fancy, you can schedule it. There are some command line parameters, which I don't think I'm going to go through in this kind of forum here. But if you wanted to schedule it, you could create a file that we drop into the RPro folder, and then we schedule it with command line parameters. Best done with a tech, though, that's done it before the first time, and then once you have the schedule running, it would do a test and automatically reconstruct things on whatever schedule you set up.
And this can't be set up to be, a person has to run this, a Reconstruct? That's how we do it.
I just said you could schedule it if you wanted to, right? Okay,
all right, that's all right.
There's a whole set of command line parameters, which we would have to go through, setting those up in the scheduler and creating what's called a recon list.txt. And so there's more to that than I would want to go through right now with everybody, but the best thing to do is our techs do it all the time. If you want to do it, just call up and have a tech do it. Just say, look, I'd like to see it done, but I don't really want to learn it that much. I just want it to be happening.
Yeah, they'll set up schedules for you if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, it's super easy. It's not that bad. It's just more than I want to go through in a webinar, probably while we're introducing basic tech support to the world. All right. Anyway, checking shortcuts. Yeah. All right. So the shortcuts on our desktop, there's a few things we should know about our shortcut on our desktop. Do I even have a shortcut on my desktop? Yes, I do. Thank you. All right. So in here, things we need to know. We need to start in. So this is a little sandbox as a virtual PC. It doesn't actually exist. I just have a C drive. I don't have an R drive. But most of the time when we sell and create a computer for Retail Pro, we put the operating system on the C drive. We put the Retail Pro on the extra drive, which is usually the R drive. In some cases, a D drive. But we need to know. Retail Pro needs to know its start in folder. If you don't have your start in folder in there, some other program. Retail Pro will probably be fine actually, but like plugins and other things that you might be using with Retail Pro won't be fine. So it's best to have a shortcut in your startup, which you don't have to have because the whole thing is specified right there, right? So I could get rid of this here, and it wouldn't really hurt me. I still know where to get to this executable.
Right.
But no, you should always have your start in populated correctly. All right. Anyway, go back to properties here. On the top here, space WS : right? So the way Retail Pro 8 works is that we have so many licenses. We go into the licensing tool and we say we're going to license Workstation 1 to the main, and then we say this workstation is using Workstation 1. We do that right here. So if I were to take this here, shortcut, copy this, paste it on the screen here. Let's go. Well, I don't know what I said, but Siri just got really excited. She does that though. I don't say anything, and she thinks I'm calling her. That's weird. Not sure about this latest iOS update, right? So if we change that to Workstation 2 and we launch this here, and we say log in, I don't even know if I've licensed that one, so we'll see here. Well, unable to create history directory, blah blah blah. Default path. It's angry at me. Invalid path. Great. So it's really not happy with me on that one, is it? C Retail Pro 8, Workstation 2. So it's just really not happy about that whole thing. Let me see what happens if we go out here, go into R Pro, go down to here. We have a Workstation 2 folder. Now that could have just got created like 2 seconds ago. It probably did get created 2 seconds ago. So, oh no, it probably didn't get created 2 seconds ago. It's probably got updated. So let's just go do that. Let's do this. Okay, so let's take all of this stuff here and get rid of it. So there's nothing in my Workstation 2 folder at all. And we'll try going into Workstation 2. Would you like to create a shortcut on the desktop? Sure, what the heck. Great, wonderful. Seeing it repopulates our folder for us. And checking licensing. Run a demo. And we're in with WS2, bottom right corner, WS2, right? So now I could essentially go in twice, right? I'm in as WS1 here, and I'm in as WS2 here. 2 copies of Retail Pro on the same machine. Weird, but you know, if you have the licensing, right? If you have extra licenses that aren't being used, you could be in 2 places at once on one machine. Kind of weird. Now, if we had 2 people trying to use the same license, right, over again, then we would run into the locking that causes us to, you know, this workstation's in use, right? And if we were to do something like this, we were to go to Options, System Preferences, and then on another workstation, right? Kind of handy having 2 workstations. Try and go into a receipt. It would tell us that system file locks are set, right? You can't drive the car. Go ahead.
So what you're saying is if somebody tried to logged in on WS1, say, and then they went over to another computer, forgot that that was WS3 and tried to log in as WS1, it would show that WS1 is locked?
Yep.
Am I understanding that? Okay.
Yep. Like, for instance, we have many situations where we have a big company using Retail Pro, and they have an accounting department that has 3 or 4 people in the accounting department. They all need access to our Pro, but we don't want to pay for a license for all 4 of them. So we make them all the same workstation number. And, well, I mean, you know, they go in for 15 minutes a day, and they're mostly not using the license at all. And so on an exception basis, they go in just to check something, and then they're out again. So, you know, we give them all the same workstation number. Yes, if 2 of them try to go in at the same time, it says, hey, you're number 2, and this workstation's in use, and you can't come in.
Okay.
But in that scenario, they just look over at the desk next to them and say, are you using our Pro? And they say, yeah. And they say, hey, can you get out? And they say, yeah. And then they go in, right?
Yeah.
So that one's harder for me to recreate, but this one's easy. This is a system preference. This is a tolerance lock. This is not a workstation lock. In this situation here, I'm doing something that is not tolerant.
Oh, okay.
Not what?
Not tolerant.
Not tolerant.
Right. Well, you can't have the engine taken apart and then go drive the car, right?
Right.
I'm in system preferences. I'm tinkering with the engine right here.
Okay.
And over here, I'm trying to go make a sale. Okay, well, that's not tolerant, right? That's not going to work. That's never going to be a good plan. So it's saying, look, you know, preferences is currently in use. You could damage files and your system was improperly shut down. Those are your reasons that you're getting this message. Mm-hmm. It is in fact A, right? A is the reason this is popping up. If you're sure this is not the reason, run RPro DB, right? Remove the lock. But if we try and run RPro DB, it's not going to work, right? Because in fact, system preferences is in use. Oh, now see there's the file lock I was trying so hard to get earlier. And it looks like it is going to let me remove it, which is very dangerous. I think it's because I Jimmy rigged it, and it's actually the same computer doing both things, right?
Yeah.
So that's what the lock removal prompt looks like. And it should not have let me in here. And if it was 2 separate computers and not one, like sandbox computer, it probably would not have let me pass go here and collect $200. That's a good thing to know, though. Now I know how to show that lock better in the future, right? So, all right. So does everybody gets Reconstruct. Everybody gets, where are we here? Checking shortcuts. Right? That's what we're doing. So the shortcuts really is about knowing how to use the workstation, how to assign the workstation. And I have to mention one of the things, we're talking about workstations, I have to mention that if you go into My Computer and you go to Properties and you go to Advanced System Settings and Environment Variables, just know that there can be a workstation setting in here. RPro workstation is one of the settings that gets put into this section here. So,
okay.
And RPro Net is the other one, right? So, but if the computer wants to always default to workstation 1, you know, in certain situations, that means you probably didn't change your background variables. But again, if, you know, there's more than one place that can actually be, and so I would say, you know, if you need help with that, give us a holler. You know what I mean? My text can help you anytime with that. That's a super easy thing to go and fix for us.
That's the module before this.
All right, so let's get rid of this junk, get back in here. Let's see what we're doing here. Confirming backups. Yeah, confirming backups is critical. I don't have a backup installed here, but there's a number of different ways to schedule backups. Usually we use some kind of scheduling software like NovaStore is a really popular one, and it's just NovaStore is just a little application that we get that lets us schedule backups, right? And just copies them over. Now, backups fail. Everybody needs to know that backups fail, right? So you got to check your backups. You know, whatever system you have, you got to check your backups. Man, Brett is on it today, man. His notes are like right on the mark every time. He was already calling out the environment variables before I even showed it to anybody, you guys. With backups, you need to put into your phone, put into your calendar, put into whatever you want, some kind of schedule where you go in and you just check the backups. And, you know, that means going into a backup file, opening it up, looking at the size of the backup. And if you can, looking at the files inside the backup and checking out that they have a correct size. And if you want to go nuts, you know, what you could do is you could just restore the files to a different directory somewhere and then take a look at the file. The file, like a sales file from last month or 2 months ago or 5 months ago, whatever, it should be exactly the same size as the current file in the RPro database, right? So if I looked at sales 2017-06, you know, I haven't been making sales into the June file now for a few months. It should not have really changed. So the one I restored to a different directory and my current one should be the same size. But you need to, I don't know how else to say it, you need to have some kind of religious rite of passage here where you go back and do this backup check every month for sure. So if you do it once a month, then the worst liability you can have is that your backup fails and then RPro crashes or the computer crashes and you lose all your data. Then you have 1 month old data, right? That's the worst that can happen if you've got a backup. Now the backup also needs to be two-tiered, meaning it needs to be on-site and off-site. So redundant backups here on the computer if you want. I don't care. We oftentimes will make a folder here on the root drive, and we'll call it like RPro DB backups or something, and in there we'll start writing backups. So it's not a bad idea to have like some backups like in a folder like right here. Now, if I lose this computer and this hard drive, I lose the backups and I lose the RPro, right? But if I get a virus and I have infected files and I need to go back three backups and I have 10 in that folder, that's not a bad thing, is it? So, tier 1 is to have multiple on-site backups. Tier 2 is to have off-site backup. You need to have off-site backup. I don't care if it's iBackup or Mozy Pro, or where you're writing things to the cloud, which is a never-ending subscription, by the way, or if you have a schedule like Novastore and you have a terabyte drive. In fact, you have a couple terabyte drives. You plug one in and it writes backups to this terabyte drive all week long, and then you swap them and take that one home and bring the other one in. And you keep going, right? Then you have to just buy the terabyte drives once, and then there's no reoccurring fee.
Did you say terabyte?
Yeah, terabyte. So you got megabyte, gigabyte, terabyte. It keeps going, but we don't want to go any further than that. I mean, a terabyte's 1,000 gigabytes, and we never used to use terabyte drives, except now they're what, $50 for a 1 terabyte drive. They're cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to go out and buy a portable hard drive, why would I limit myself to 100 gigs or something when I can have 1,000 gigs? I mean, you can get 4 terabyte drives. I don't know what you do with 4 terabytes. I mean, they're like $250 too, so I wouldn't go there.
Take it offsite. No, the tier 2, he's talking like what Karen's got in her computer, the cloud. Okay. Tier 1
Correct.
would I used to have on mine that I need to get on mine. Okay.
Right. We want both. We want to be covered no matter what the situation is, and we want to know that those are good backups. So on a regular basis, we want to test them, open them up, just validate that the data is still good. Because honestly, I could go on hours, but off the top of my head, I know of a particular client who upgraded, and then the computer crashed, and we went to the 2 backups. Both backups had failed more than 6 months ago, and he didn't know it.
Wow.
So we had 6-month-old data that had to be re-upgraded. So we paid for the upgrade twice. Yeah, that's just wrong. That is just wrong on so many levels.
So do you have a backup program for an actual computer that you prefer over another?
Novastore is one we use right now. We sell it, and I think you can buy it online too. The Novastore is just a scheduling program.
Okay.
I'm not an expert on it, by the way, but yeah, Nova Backup.
Okay.
It's just a piece of software that that's it. There's a little. Oh God, that's just scaring me right there. Yeah, the little logo there. Yeah, that's what they sell, and it's just an application. So you could use this to write to your terabyte drives.
Okay.
You know, the terabyte drive could be both your local redundant and your offsite, because you swap them and then you start building them another set of files, right?
Uh-huh.
And with a terabyte drive, you know, you could clean these up yearly. I mean, honestly.
Right.
I mean, you're not going to fill a terabyte drive up with a version 8 backup. I mean, maybe if you and then really if you what's that?
Was that a one-time purchase, or is that an online program that you just subscribe to?
No, it's a one-time purchase.
Okay.
Downloads the computer.
Okay. Oh, that.
Yeah, my salespeople can give you more information on it if you want. Not a big deal.
Yeah, I'll get a hold of.
I'm 1.26 gigabytes compressed. That's going to be like maybe half a gig, you know, and that's more than I need. All I need is the data files. But if I got 1,000 gigabytes, I'm probably going to just say, hell, get the whole Retail Pro folder. You know, why nitpick?
Right.
Right.
Space is no longer an issue, but it is still the final frontier. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, moving on here. Don't forget to look at the basics. That's all I'm going to say on that one. You know, I've had clients. I said things like to them like, check to make sure the keyboard's plugged in. They went off and yelled at me for 5 minutes and then said, oh, wait a second, the keyboard's not plugged in.
It's a bad feeling.
We've had that happen.
Oh, come on. All of us have done that. All of us in this room, and everybody's done that. Okay, nobody gets a free ride on that one. So, you know, always check the basics. Reboot the computer. Check to make sure it's plugged in. Make sure the little network light's flashing in the back. You know what I mean? There's just a few basic things that we should always do, period.
Yeah.
And so we're not going to beat that one up anymore. All right, so dumping the printer. So dumping the printer or resetting a printer. Really easy thing to do. And so on, let me see here, on a, and nobody laugh at my art, okay? All right, so on a basic receipt printer, if we looked at a basic receipt printer, which I really should have pictures of, but then I can't draw and do funny little tricks with it, right? So if we have a basic receipt printer of some kind that has a little place where the receipt comes out, usually on the front there's an off-on switch, right? A little toggle switch, and then usually up on top there's a feed key, right? So if we press this feed key, you know, receipt paper feeds out, right? Boom, right? If we turn this thing off, right, and we hold down the feed key, and while holding the feed key, we turn it back on, what'll happen is it'll print out a little like pattern on the receipt paper. And then it'll give us a little prompt that says press the feed key again. We press it again, and it prints out the BIOS, the current version of software installed on the printer, etc. With none of the stuff we care about. But the important thing is that's what we call a reset or a dump. So that dumps the memory on the receipt printer, and it causes the receipt printer to be basically fresh. So if you're having trouble with the receipt printer, if the receipt printer particularly, and the receipt printers are notorious for this, the first thing you want to do is dump the thing. Nice. Brent caught the little reference there. All right, so anyway, the receipt printers, I don't know, I'm going to say every few months or a year, they need to be reset. And you could, when you do your backup check, if you wanted to, you could walk around and reset your receipt printers too. It never hurts them. You know.
Good
now,
idea.
On other printers, like laser printers, there's usually some function on the bigger laser printers, and you have to look at the menu, and there's usually a way of resetting those too. It's not quite as easy, but there is almost on all printers there's a reset function. With the receipt printers, it's easy. You just turn it off, then hold down the feed key, turn it on, and it goes zzz, and you press the feed key and it goes zzz, and then you're done.
The tag printer is going to be the same principle, yeah?
Tag printers, the older ones do reset the same way. The newer ones, I think, have like the Godex has a button on the back right. So if you were looking at a Godex, one of the newer Godex printers that we're using, and it has like on the front, on the top here, it has like an LED readout screen that gives you menus, and you can do it through there. But if you were to turn it around and look at the back of this thing, on the back left corner, you'd see where the power supply plugs in, you know, and then there's a little like dimple next to that. And if you take a pin and stick a pin, like a sharp instrument in that thing, it'll reset the Godex.
Okay, yeah, we've got the old Zebra still.
Yeah, Zebra is pretty sure you can turn it off and hold the feed key down, turn it on, and then the thing will flash. When you see it flash, you let go, and it'll do a reset. With the Zebra also, you can, with the newer Zebra, the GK420, I believe you can just hold down the feed key, and I believe the little light there will start flashing and counting. It's been a while since I've done this, but I believe it'll go like flash, 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 and it'll go up to 7. But on the first level is 4. If you wait for 4 flashes and let go, it'll do a reset. If you do it all 7, it'll do a reset, and it'll print out like verbose everything about the printer. But it's a more complete reset. But anyway, yes, that is the first line of defense. And with receipt printers particularly, you want to reset them before you call tech support. 90% of the time, it fixes the problem. So, definitely the right move. And Workstation Preferences. Hours of endless enjoyment in there, boy. Okay, so Workstation Preferences. Let's, I guess, buzz through this real fast. Let's kind of touch on the things that are important, skip over the stuff that's not so important. On the first page here, right on top of this thing, these are your paths. These are very important. Do not screw these up. That's where your sales right. So if you get that to the wrong place, you'll start creating two different sales files, right? Like if I wrote this to a different directory, and then what could happen is that Workstation 1 is writing sales files to one place, Workstation 2 is writing them to another place. Then you have to get a tech to merge the files. Real pain in the butt. Now, so generally speaking, I would not mess with these two on top. Just leave those alone. This one here is your homepage URL, so this just points to your main menu, right? Everybody knows the main menu is not part of Retail Pro, right? So if I were to type in here, http://www.google, if I could type today, that is, and click Save here, and then the main menu of our Pro would change from having a Retail Pro icon to being just on Google, right? Now, you can actually point that thing towards pretty much anything. A JPEG, you could point it towards a Word doc. You just got to save the Word doc as an HTML. So you just go create a Word, you know, in Word, you just create a document of some kind, like this one here. So here we have one. Let's go save as, and let's put this right where we can get to it, like there, PHP text export, and let's change this to be a single file, where we have HTML, right? HTML, right? So we click Save, and then and here we go ahead and browse to our C drive here, if we can get to it, and computer and C drive, and scroll down here, all files. Okay, BHP text export HTML. Okay. Now this is a very popular function right there. So nice. I'm glad I'm one of these. Anyway, this is a popular thing to do right here, because you could put this on the network shared drive, and all the workstations can then be pointed towards it. Then, if you need to, you can just go out to that file, find that file, and edit it as needed. So, if somebody says, "Hey, I didn't see that note that we're having this big promotion," well, you logged into Retail Pro, didn't you? You know, so I can just go open this here with Word, right? And I could now edit this. So literally, when they log into Retail Pro, they would see whatever you want them to see every time they log in. So no excuses for not seeing the memo. You just didn't choose to read it.
Right.
Right. Now, and of course, in there, if you were to be out editing this in HTML land, you can create links, and there's all kinds of stuff you can do in here. You could create shortcuts and links and all kinds of crap. You can also point this towards, like I said, a JPEG. So if you wanted to just point this towards a picture, that's most common if you have like your logo or something that's really slick and you want it to be the thing that we look at when we open Retail Pro. That's another nice choice you can do. Anything in libraries, pictures. Oh yeah. So we go in here, change it to all files. We get our little chrysanthemum there and fire that up, and we have chrysanthemum on the main menu.
Right. Could do daily motivations.
Now, I had another client who showed me something that I didn't even know, and that is that you can point this towards a folder. So like if we just do this here and we save that, it'll just open up that folder. Weird, but you could have like like documents in there. You could have policies, procedures, manuals in there. You could have all kinds of stuff in there, right?
Right.
You could have shortcuts in that folder.
Oh.
That open up email.
I like it.
So that is a really extremely powerful little trick that's right there in Workstation Preferences, homepage URL. So you can point it towards whatever you want. E-manuals, this just points towards the e-manuals folder. So in Retail Pro, in the default installation of Retail Pro, you will find an e-manuals folder. And in there is the docs folder. And in there is the manuals, Retail Pro, user guide, right from Retail Pro directly. So if you're on the main menu of Retail Pro and you
Okay.
you go to e-manuals, what it does is it loads the HTML that's in that folder, right? So in the e-manuals folder, if we go to index.html, it'll look the same, right? There's the index.html, and it's exactly the same as going to here, except it's not in Retail Pro, right? And then if you click on one of these, it just opens up that section, right? So whatever document you have to open up, and then but the point is that if you don't want people browsing the manuals, you could get rid of this. You could just delete it, right? Then they can't get to it by clicking the e-manual link on the main menu. But if you know where they are, you could still go look at them anytime you want, right? So anyway, that's the gig on that one. This one here, you don't even need. This one's not being used. There's a setting down farther in reports here that turns that on. And most people would not need this. I have used it. I used it once, but it was a situation where we had a sports stadium, and then they had like 7 registers that were all Zing out at the same time, exactly the same time. They went full tilt, selling. When they locked their doors, and boom, all of them wanted to Z out at the same time. And when all 7 registers hit the sales file at the same time, well, the first one in got their report done first. The second one in got it done reasonably fast. The 7th one in had to wait like 30 minutes for them to finish using the file. So what this one does is it creates local sales files, and then the XCI reads the local file rather than the network one. Speeds everybody up if you have that conflict. But most people are never going to have that conflict. So this path is not even needed. All right, so this is an automatic lockout. This is, you can throw this in if people don't, if they walk away from the register and leave it open, basically, so that anybody could just walk up and click open cash drawer, right?
Yeah.
Because somebody signed in and they forgot to sign out because they're dorks.
They're different, each one.
Right, so here you can come in and set this down to like 5 minutes. Do not set this to 1 minute. do not do this.
Right.
Because if you do this and you have integrated credit cards, here's what's going to happen. Nice. Wrong. One of these days I need to get a license copy of that, huh? All right. We're ringing a sale, having a good time ringing a sale here, right? And we then go to process a credit card. So a little credit card window pops up, and we click OK, and it says, oh, we're processing this credit card on the PIN pad. And we have somebody who's just not, they're PIN pad challenged, okay? They take longer than a minute to process their card, at which point a little lockout pops up overriding all this, right? It says that we're locked out, right? But we can't get the lockout to go away because the credit card machine screens underneath haven't been cleared. You're in a catch-22. You're done.
Yeah.
Through one there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So we don't set the lockout to less than like 4 or 5 minutes. I mean, take your worst case scenario on the PIN pad and double it, right?
Yeah.
So I like 5 minutes. 5 minutes that's a long time at point of sale, and there's a huge liability if you walk away from the cash drawer and you leave it open for 5 minutes, basically. But if you set it to lower than that, you're gonna have problems. So, is what it is, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
This prompt thing, I don't care. If you have a desktop shortcut, great. If you don't, you know what I mean? I don't know that we care about that. Appearance, I don't play with these anymore. Large flat panel screens are cheap, you know, $100 for 24-inch now, right? So we don't really need to be modifying the sidebar menu to not have the icons and just do text label only, right?
Okay.
No reason for it anymore. Monitors are cheap now. Get a big monitor. I'm just going to tell you. This is dumb. Don't do this. This is terrible. This is nice. We like this. This is good. This one's terrible. So let's just go see what that is so you understand what I mean. I don't mind the top one here. The top one lets me like navigate around. Like I could go and look at things and then I could hit the home button. It would go back to where I told it to be. But if I turn that bottom one on and I go into Retail Pro and we go to Form View, you see it now on the bottom of the screen here. Let's see if I can.
Yeah, that's annoying.
You see that the blue arrows at the bottom that have been introduced into my screen that weren't there before?
Yep.
And because my screen wasn't designed with this in mind, it's now cutting off the total.
Sure. Yep. I can see that.
And I don't know that I ever want a virtual keyboard, you know what I mean? Or a numeric pad, right? So not a big fan of that one. That one's weird. Okay. You need to have a real keyboard. All right, so we're going to turn that one off. Under Appearance, we're going to turn this one off because it kills me. When New is selected, position the cover in. Reset to uppermost left is the default, and we are Western culture. We always like the things starting the left, right? Kind of a no-brainer. Scheduler. If you run the scheduler, this is a monitor. So if you turn this on, if you run the scheduler, if you don't run the scheduler, you don't. That's it. Now, if Windows decides to you know, force close the scheduler because Windows had a bad day, when you open RPro, this will check and say, hey, the scheduler's not running. Can I go ahead and start it? That's what this does. So you won't go days without the scheduler running. The next time you open RPro, it'll say, hey, we need to launch a scheduler, and you'll be back in business. This is just offline mode. Offline mode is it's a lot. We can't go over it in this forum, but I can give you an idea. Offline mode. So here's our server, and the server is called a primary data resource. What offline mode, if set up fully correctly and deployed correctly, what it will do is it will cause, in the middle of the night when nobody's there, it'll cause the primary data resource to write what's called an auxiliary or alternate data resource. And the alternate data resource will then copy down to local data resources across the network for every computer. So it dumps the data off, then it lets the primary go on to do backups and polling and whatever it's going to happen, right? And then it spends this one here spends the night populating it down to all the local workstations. And then if the primary data resource is taken offline, then a message pops up on here and you have to relaunch RPro. When you relaunch RPro, you're using your local data resource. And then when this comes back online, and you're told, you know, to do so, you exit RPro and go back into Retail Pro. When you come back in, it says offline sales have been detected and will be synchronized. So it doesn't say, would you like to synchronize? It says they will be synchronized now. And so if you've made a lot of sales and you've got a line of 18 people, don't exit RPro. Anyway, that's what this is. This is where you turn it on and you give it the path and places for everything and where the folders are and how to write all that data and what you want synchronized. And then there's more to that. There's the scheduling of the tasks and the scheduler and all that. So if that's something you were ever interested in, I would set up an appointment with one of the trainers, techs, whatever, to just set that up. All right, so documents, not a ton here, a little bit. This one here on the top, be careful of this one here. This was put in there for a really old version of Retail Pro that people wanted to be able to set up a price, like a sale on a price level, and then turn it on right in the receipt and have the receipt retain the price level. But it can be, if you're not using it correctly, this one can be, there's a liability there. You could change to a price level by accident and stay there the rest of the day and give everybody a deal that you weren't intending to give them. This next switch is brilliant, but it defaults wacko. So I'm going to say that this one here should be turned off. Now everybody gets what print zero quantity items is. This has to do with somebody makes a mistake, rings an item up twice. We don't let them delete items off the receipt. So they zero the quantity out so it does not affect the transaction. And because we uncheck this, it doesn't print and the customer never sees it.
Okay.
And why wouldn't we want them to be able to remove items off the receipt? Why can't they just delete the item, right?
Yeah. That makes sense.
But we all get why we don't take items off receipts. So I'm just going to let everybody know because it's the right thing to do, right? So I ring up some items and I go to tender, took exact change, and then I had my cash drawer open and I give them back their change and I give them their stuff in a bag and never print the receipt. Customer walks away and I delete this and I go back over here and I delete this and delete this. And now I start ringing the next customer up on this transaction right here. I never aborted the receipt, did I?
So it shows that you got money, but no transaction.
No, nothing shows that I got money. That money's mine.
Oh, it doesn't even show you got money.
I left no audit trail.
Got it.
Yeah, there's no way to double check sweetheart ring and all that.
Okay.
Right. So if we ring an item up twice, what we do is we zero out the quantity, right? We don't allow them, so through security, we do not allow them to take items off the receipt, right? Then when they go take money for this and cash, whatever, and then they print this receipt, is it going to print? There we go. That's exciting. It should only show the 2 items that I allowed onto this receipt, and I have no idea if that's going to work or not. Yeah, there we go. So you see that even though there were 3 items on this receipt, the one that was zeroed out no longer shows.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So we don't let people delete stuff off the receipts, and the way we get around that is because when you do that, the cashiers freak out and they want to revolt and they start like circling the wagons. Usually, it becomes a little awkward. But when they say, "Hey, the customer's going to be confused," you say, "No, they're not. It's not going to print. They're never going to know it unless you tell them." Right? So you have to do that workstation by workstation. Version 9 fixes that, by the way. For those of you who are considering going to version 9, they make that a system preference, which is kind of smart, actually.
Okay.
Right down here, we've got just sales orders. That's all this does. Turns off sales orders, turns on sales orders. These 3 are basically the same. So if I'm only using one of these, I probably should only leave one of these turned on, right?
Yes.
If I don't use registries, I should turn them off. That's all that is. This is pending vouchers. Now, pending vouchers is a function that I have only a couple of clients use. So the reason I bring it up is not because I like the feature, because I really don't like the feature. In fact, I don't like pending vouchers. When you have pending vouchers, you make a receiving. It does not affect inventory. So you're selling things at the wrong cost, and the quantity on hand has not been updated yet, right? You're waiting for the voucher to be approved.
Right.
Now, the reason I bring it up is because if somebody checks this off and you don't know it, then you're just writing data to your pending voucher folder, and you go to look for that voucher, and then you end up on the tech board because you say, "Hey, I made this voucher. I got it printed in my hand, but I can't find it in history." Then I go into your pending voucher section, and you got like 100 of these things you got to go and accept. And then I turn off the preference and say, "Don't play with that switch anymore." So anyway, that's why I bring it up. This is more often than not, this is a tech problem that ends up on our board. Right. Most people don't use this. I do have a client that does use it pretty well back east in Virginia, but but most customers don't like this, and most of us don't have any intention of using it. So so steer clear of it. This options screen here, this just lets you change your default store. So if I have a main office, and the main office uses store 0, and in the main office on one of the workstations I have a web store, and that web store needs to sell out of inventory 6 or whatever, I could go into that one workstation and say, no, this one's going to be defaulting to inventory 6. That's all this does. It's handy to know about, but not a big deal. This is just the config for the email receipts function that's built into version 8. I highly recommend, if you have not set that up, that you do. And it's one of those things I would do with the tech, because unless you're an expert on email and stuff, you're going to need to know the outgoing mail server and all the port numbers and the SSL requirements, which is not rocket science. You can Google most of it. But anyway, this is where you set up your email. Then you have a button you have to add that says, instead of print update, it's email and update, right?
Mm-hmm.
EFT, this is your credit card, right? This is where you set up your credit card. This is where you turn it on. This is where you turn it off. So if I was turning on my credit card, I would set the credit card type up here to whatever I'm using. You should be using merchantware or nothing at this point. PPM is not PCI compliant. None of these are PCI compliant. Well, Shift4 is, but Shift4 and Retail Pro had a falling out, and they wanted to go with one solution, and so they chose Cayenne Merchant Warehouse. So Shift4 is definitely PCI compliant, and Retail Pro is PCI compliant, but they're not PCI compliant together.
I need the hand jobs, and I need it.
Right, they're certified independently PCI compliant. They're not certified together PCI compliant. Although we're splitting hairs there, right? But the only approved PCI compliant software is the merchantware or Cayenne. But if you do turn it on, we want to close the dialog box. Sure, absolutely. Automatically print update, yes, absolutely. You know, all these are good actually. We don't do this anymore. This is printing the credit card draft is what that is. Printing an EFT receipt, electronic funds transfer receipt on approval is for having the customer sign, but they sign the PIN pad now, right? They don't sign a piece of paper anymore. Anyway, so then of course there's various setups down here for all the different kinds of tenders we take. This also becomes a system preference in version 9. They take it out of the workstation altogether. Sequences, for the most part, sequences here are irrelevant because we don't use workstation sequences. In fact, I don't know anybody, none of our clients use workstation sequences because it's too confusing. We use a sequence at the store level. So a store has one receipt number of 526. That's it. I don't have one on workstation 1 and another one on workstation 2. I only have one receipt number with that per store. So in reports here, we already talked about that, but this one here is golden. That is a beautiful switch. If you're not using that, you should be. Absolutely should be. So right now, when you're in reports and you run a report, it's going to just, like, it'll take all the data, take it all out, and then it'll run a subtotal right in there, and then it'll just keep going with the data, right? And making the report very hard to read. So you turn that little switch on in Workstation Preferences, you're going to get your data, right? Then you're going to get like a subtotal. Then you're going to get a little space, and it's going to start over with the next set of data, right? Then you're going to get a subtotal, and you're going to get a little space in there. It's going to make it a lot easier to read. Why it's not a workstation preference in reports directly, I don't know. Peripherals, we're not going to go through and set up all the peripherals. I can answer questions about any of these if anybody has any. But I will point out that shopper displays and pin pads are notorious for locking up the register. So if I have a shopper display set up and it's not communicating correctly, when I go to make a receipt, the receipt screen could end up hanging, like frozen. Of course, it's probably not going to do it for me now. But if you lock up, going into here, if you lock up, one of the first things I would do is I would go into my workstation preferences and turn off my shopper display. So You can't turn off a pin pad, but you could reset the pin pad. That's the answer on the pin pad, like on the Genius device. There's a reset, which I can't really go through now, but if you hold down 1, 5, and 9 and type the password in there, you could say reboot this, or you could just climb under the counter and unplug it right at the little network block where it has the power cable. You could just pop the power cable out, count to 10, put it back in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the note I would say is here, you should know how to set up all your own hardware, and there are different printers out there. We're using a new series of printers now. They're just tiny. They're like little tiny, like they're half the size of the old ones. And so you should know what printers you're using and how they set up. And they're not really hard. You install them in Windows, and then you just go into here and set them up down there as far as the printer goes. And then the cache drawer shopper display is all this. Where's your cache drawer? Is it serial port 1 or 2? Is it tied to a printer, parallel ports? And what opens the cache drawer, that kind of stuff. All right, so printing down here, not much going on, a little bit down here, but a couple of things I'll point out. If you have more than one printer activated, you will get more than one print job. Only have the printer of choice activated, right? If you don't have a design file selected, it will prompt you for one every time. Have a design file selected, right?
Okay.
Paper size, not required, but I'm going to say it's recommended. It should take the default paper size from the driver, but sometimes it doesn't. So for my money, if you're in here setting it up, just go ahead and specify the paper size, right? Now, if you want choices, you check these off at the bottom, right? If you don't want to see any menus, if you just wanted to do what you told it to do and shut up, you don't check those off. Right? Now at the top here, let's talk about this all receipt thing here. So all receipts only works when you've checked off the override. So if the override's checked off, these settings down here are not active. Only that one is. If the override is not checked off, then each of these settings is active. So why would I want to not use the override? Why wouldn't I want all my receipts to print the same way? Well, because I may want one receipt design to print with a new receipt and yet a different one to print on a former receipt so that I know it's a reprint. I may need a different one for my gift card receipt or my whatever, right? I may have other designs that I want to print out that aren't all tied to the same one, and maybe I only have that one. If I only want to use that one, I check this off up here. I say override the individual document settings, and I then can ignore all those little ones and just set it up here at the highest level. So mostly with receipts, I use the document settings, but with everything else, like purchase orders, receiving vouchers, transfer slips, I use the override. I mean, I don't care on a voucher if it's active or reprint. I don't care. Just print it. Call it a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But receipts gets a little stickier. So sometimes we want to have different designs for different areas, and that's what that lets us do. You uncheck the override, then you have to go through and set up each individual setting. In here is everything you could probably want to know, every document that you'd get set up. Kind of an important point would be that the Windows default printer does not need to be a receipt printer, right? So my point is that we are going to take receipts and default to whatever printer we want to default it to, regardless of the Windows setting. Now, why would that matter? Why do we even care what the Windows setting is, right? Well, all the reports, when we run reports and it kicks up to the screen and we say, oh, that's a cool report, right? All of the, I don't know what that is. What the heck is that? Let's just find out, right? So this report that I just ran is up on the screen in an 8.5 by 11 view because my Windows default printer uses an 8.5 by 11 driver.
Okay.
Does everybody kind of get that? So what I mean is, if you only have a receipt printer and a tag printer, then you need to install a fake printer, like a generic text-only printer or an XPS document writer or a PDF converter or a fax machine. I don't care. You need to have an 8.5 by 11 printer that just is used for the presentation of the preview. You don't actually have to ever print to it. But the Windows default printer should always be an 8.5 by 11, or you're going to run this, it's going to pop up in a view that's not going to be acceptable. It's going to be like goofy, and then you're going to be like calling tech support and, you know, spending time on the phone to get it fixed, right? I don't think I have anything in here. I don't have anything in here that's small, like a tag printer. I don't have anything in here to show you what that. But you can, I mean, if you default your Windows environment to a tag printer, this would be on a 2-inch page, right?
Yeah.
So instead of having 3 pages, I'd have like 870 pages.
That makes sense.
Right. And if I go to receipt paper, then it's going to be probably only have 1 page actually, but I might have 2 or 3. But what's going to happen is that receipt paper is 3 1/4 inches wide, so it's going to be 10 feet tall, but 3 1/4 inches wide, right? And if I turn it landscape, then it's really shallow and
Yep.
really wide.
Yep.
So the point here is just in Windows, make sure your Windows default printer is not a receipt printer.
Okay.
And not a tag printer. It needs to be anything else. And again, it doesn't have to be like mine set to OneNote. I'm not ever going to print a OneNote, but OneNote has 8.5 by 11 background, right? So I could do it to this one here. I could set this one, and it's totally going to be fine with that. It'll still run any report I want to run, and it'll be okay. Nothing to print. Yeah, date range. I'm guessing that 23rd of January 2006 was not a happening day. All right. What else we got here? We got DVS, item SID. That's tons of fun. And then some polling, huh? All right. So DVS stands for Data Verification System. So if we go to Tools and More, we see this. There is a tool called Data Verification. And data verification is a tool that combines all of the various functions that Retail Pro had written in previous versions into one big glorious tool. So over the years, Retail Pro has had to write little add-on programs to fix things. And then in version 8, they just said, look, we're just going to dump all that into one big tool. And in here, they're specifically calling out the item SID. I'm just going to buzz through what these other areas are real quick, then we'll take a look at the item SID. Verification is really meant to correct costing errors that Retail Pro might make or quantity errors. It can be used to, you can run an audit on a single item. Now to do that, you'd have to go in and basically exclude everything else. So here I'm running an audit on item 123. Anyway, if you then run this, it'll show you every transaction ever done on that item. Literally, I received 10, I sold 2, I transferred 2, I had 6 left, I received 5 more, I got 11, right? It'll stack them all up and show you every transaction in the order they occurred. Pretty sweet. You can, if you want to, force milestones, and then in the audit tool, you can say, I only want to read back to that milestone on that day or that day. If you don't have a milestone, then you're reading all history all the time, and it's going to take a while. So, you know, I'm just going to say, don't hold your breath on that one. All right, so revision. Revision lets us play around with the data, item style, customer, and then find and replace. Find and replace, very powerful tool. You can go in and tell it, you know, Every time you find BLACK, change it with BLK, right? I want to have standard abbreviations. And you can do it for history and for the current inventory file at the same time. You can clean up both. We could spend hours in DVS here playing around. That's why I'm just going to do a quick, fast overview. Maintenance, these are some of these tools I mentioned a minute ago. Purging customers, purging old purchase orders, purging data, right? Recalc is a section where they've got a bunch of tools that fix things. So, analyzing the dates in inventory. Now, when people run these tools, if you don't run them for the right time period, you will blank out dates, right? So if I rebuild receive quantities on my POs, and I only read last month, and I have a PO in there that's 2 months old that was fully received, it's going to look like it wasn't received at all, because I didn't choose to include it in the analysis, so it got blanked. So if you're going to run one of these, you might want to get with a tech. All right, so in our exciting, thrill-packed agenda here, it says item and style SID. What the hell is a SID? Well, it's a sloth in Ice Age for one thing, but anyway, it is also a system ID. That's what a SID is. And that's pretty dry stuff, but an item number can be reused, right? So an item number can live a life as a letter code. We can use clean house. We can delete it. We can then make it be a tube of chapstick. I don't know, right? And if we did not delete the item correctly, if we did not run clean house on it and remove the SID, then we could run a report, and that report could show us that we sold, 100 leather jackets for 99 cents. Because the SID on the leather jacket and the system ID SID on the tube of chapstick was, in fact, the same. Now, if I have a product in inventory and I, sysadmin is the password, and I go edit it, which happens all the time, right? We make a mistake, we edit something, we screw something up, whatever, right? We then have to clean it up. So we fix it, right? Well, we made sales with it the first way, we made sales with it the second way. There's two different versions of that item out there in history. So in here, and I'll just read all history to see what we get here. Normally I wouldn't read all history, by the way. For you guys in real life, I would only read like the last year. I don't know that I want to clean up everything forever. This will go out and look at all the data, and it will find anything out there that is not the same. So here, in this situation here, I'm glad I had one. What the hell, right? We can see that the item number 25673 is in fact exactly the same. On the far left side, we have an H. Everybody sees the H there. And of course, everybody, if they look really careful and maybe get a magnifying glass, they can see the I, the letter I right above that H. I'm not sure what programmer thought it was a good idea to put green on like a dark teal background, but they should be shot probably. Anyway, I means active in inventory. Inventory is I. H is history, right? So this one system ID exists in two different forms, and you can see size and color. It looks like they got backwards there, whatever in the data input. But you can see that the size and attribute fields are the difference, right, on this item. Moreover, because this history item is in fact just a history item, it is making an assumption for us. In the mark column, it has put a capital M on the active item and a lowercase m on the history item, meaning that the lowercase item, the lowercase m, is going to be matched to the active item, meaning that it's going to be gone. It's going to overwrite that item, which is fine, right? If this is the way it currently exists, it should exist that way in history, right? Now, if I said, no, these aren't the same items, I could cause this one to be its own master. Or I could say, no, I want it to be matched. But I cannot match, I can't match the active inventory item to a history item. I can only match a history item to an active item. So, anyway, this is a good practice to do both at the item and style level. You know, the first time you run this, it'll be painful because you'll have a lot of stuff to clean up. And if you have a critical error, if like you change the department code or something, it might come up like this here, where you got the little triangle on the left side there, and it doesn't know how to resolve this because you changed one of the primary fields like department code. And then you'll have to click on this and click match. Now, if you have a lot of these, what I'm going to do is make a suggestion here. You know, clicking on this, and then clicking on this, and then clicking all the way over here, then going back across the screen is a long mouse throw. If you right-click your sidebar menu, and you click on match, you can press enter. Now, this is on the keyboard. You press enter. It opens up the shortcut. And then you could do like Control F2, for instance, and then press enter again, and that'll seal the deal. There's nothing on here that prompts you that pressing enter will let you put a shortcut on that button. However, if you press enter on it in the menu designer and put in a shortcut like Control F2, and then press enter again to seal it, what you can do then is you can click on this here, and then click on the H there, and then do Control F2, right? Then click back on the next one, click there, and do a Control F2. You see what I mean? So it greatly speeds up that first one, because you can have your left hand on the Control F2, and then just make decisions with the mouse right there on the left side of the screen. Good tip. Anyway, all right, so once we have made our choices, we then click next. It asks us if we want to go and look for duplicate items. It's always a good idea to check, by the way. Odds are you won't find any, but if you've entered an item twice and based on the rules of input, it finds duplicates, and it looks like it found a few. No duplicates around. All right, nice try. Oh, well. So now it's revised that. It's changed that history again. So now if I were to go back and run that again, it will not find anything because that item, that error no longer exists. So if I start this, it'll say 0 duplicates hid, say nothing was found. Now every item in inventory has 2 system IDs, right? It has an item and style level SID, right? Every item has 2 SIDs. So when you run the item one, you really should run the style one. Sysadmin is the password. And we should talk about that password here in a second here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't find any because we already fixed that one and it didn't have a style problem. Anyway, so the passwords, real quick on the passwords. So is it finding some duplicate? Oh, wow, look at that. Woohoo. So this item here, it's basically finding all these different items out here and saying it wants to match them. So we might have had, in this data, we might have had some kind of jackpot row where it wanted to. Anyway, all these items with the lowercase m are going to be matched to that one on top.
I do DBS.
All right, so real quick here, let's talk about this DBS and the password, because there's a real weird thing going on with the password. It's not normal at all. So if we go out into our Retail 8 RPro folder, and we look for DBS, we'll find the DBS executable. That's what we just went into. And we'll find a DBS INI. The DBS INI is where the passwords are. The default for the file is that. That's the default expiration date for a DBS INI file. If you've never edited this file, then you will not be able to get into the advanced functions of DBS. So all you have to do is open it up, go on the top here, go to Find and Replace, take 2010, right, and replace it with like 2030. right? Say replace all, and then close that and click save. But this is where the passwords in DVS are not stored with the other passwords. It's not tied to your user account. It's not tied to the sysadmin account. Each of the areas in here, the item SID, the style SID, etc., has their own set of passwords, and they're in this INI file. So that's another one of those little annoying things that gets on our tech board that shouldn't, but there you go. All right, so that's the item and style SID thing. Side note, anybody going to version 9 will have to spend some time in that item and style SID thing, because in version 9 you have a relational database and it can only have one description. So if an item has more than one description, it will not be allowed into play in the version 9 world. All right. Well, let's go talk about polling. I think that's our topic at the bottom here, right? So, all right, polling. Polling is more than one location talking, right? That's all polling is. So if we go into a menu and we go to tools, we should see polling here. We open up polling. Got our basic polling menu there. We go into stations here. We have a station file. A station file is basically a set of rules that governs how we're going to talk to that location. So in here, if we go to form view, we can see that we have the main setup page that says how we're communicating with that location and what the license location is. 001 is the inventory, A is the station file. So you could have more than one. So what I mean by that is that I have set up clients. Specifically, I set up a store. It was a pretty big store. It had 10 registers, and they had their registers in little like kiosks, little round kiosks, right, like this. And they would have a register here and a register here and a register here. They're all store 1, but this was store 1A, and then this one here was store 1B. I really can't write in this paint thing here. 1C, and eventually we got to 1J. They had 10 registers. So why would somebody set up a separate copy of Retail Pro on every single register and have every single one of these have to poll in separately? And the answer is because this is the St. Louis Cardinals store, and during an event with 45,000 people, they can't afford to go down. They want maximum redundancy. So if they have a problem in one register, because they're all separate installations, it's isolated to that one register. Makes it really hard to get a quick read of your sales, though. But anyway, when you see an A, that's the station letter, right? That's what that means. Most of us, what happens for most of us, 99% of clients in Retail Pro, what they do is that they have the main location, and then they have a remote location, and in that remote location they have, they have one register, then they have one back room, maybe they have 2 registers, right? And then one of these they make the server, they make the primary polling point, and then through the network they connect the other 2, right? So then there's only going to be a 001A here, and this is Workstation 1, Workstation 2, yeah.
I'm going to interrupt for just a sec. We just have the one store, so we're going to sign off.
Okay.
But thank you for all the info.
Not a problem. Enjoyed having you.
Thanks, Jeff. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. So 001A is the location here with 3 workstations. So that's the normal configuration. That way, when I sell something here, I immediately see that it's sold on the other workstations. If they're all separate, then I don't see anything until the data is consolidated and pulled. So, right. So in a polling station file, what happens is the main station file. If we were to look into the main station file, and if I had 10 stores, I would have 10 station files. At the remote, I look in their station file, they would have 1 station file. So the remote only talks to the main, but the main, in what we call sort of the wagon wheel scenario, the main talks to every remote, right? So if this store here wants to talk to this store over here, it has to go to the main, and then the main relays the message, right? If I'm transferring something to that store, that's how it goes. If I want to talk to the store over here, then it's just up the street, I still have to go in here and down there. That's how it works. So all data passes through the main location. The main location processes it in and sends out what's appropriate to each other location. And in the station file, here we define, you know, what store it is, what station it is, the login and password. These have to match at both ends. So I could make this 001A, 001A, which is what that is. I could make it be sysadmin, sysadmin. I could make it say Turkey. It doesn't matter. As long as whatever I put in to the station file here, right, matches the station file that's put in at the main, right? That's what matters. They have to match at both ends, or we don't get in. It's a little security thing. Anyway, our polling type here is internet. And if I was a remote, I would then type in the IP address of the main. I'm a main, so I'm not a remote, so I'm not typing an IP address in. Meaning that for these two locations to actually talk, for this location to talk to this one here is the pitcher. This one initiates the connection, right? It sends the request. This one here is the catcher. This guy here is waiting for the request to come in and receives it, if that makes sense. And why does the remote call the main? Why doesn't the main just call the remote? Gosh, because the main can accept multiple concurrent connections at the same time, but the main can only call out one at a time. So it's immensely more efficient if the remotes call into the main, because I could accept 20, 25 stores at a time, depending on my internet connection and bandwidth. Anyway, so if we pop over here to the checklist, this describes what we send. Now, you see that there's two basic sections here. There is main to remote, and then at the bottom there's remote to main, right? So these first screens are all about what the main sends down to the remote. Now, if I'm at the remote, I'm not bothering with these. I'm only going down to this one. And if I'm at the main, I'm not bothering with the last one. I'm only doing these top ones. Everybody kind of gets that. So here under inventory, there's some easy settings here. First off, all if changed is a beautiful thing. So let's talk about all if changed. Let's pick on departments. Okay, departments. What do you got? Like, 100 departments if you're a big store, maybe, with 100 records, it's not worth managing the differences. If you change them, just pull the whole thing down and call it a day, right? And all these files in that column, and they're commission schedule, committed, all have changed, man. Just pull the whole thing down. We're not going to mess with tiny files. Not worth the time to try and figure out which record's been changed. Just overwrite the thing at the remote. Okay, differences. Differences are big files, like inventory. Now, with inventory, I could have several 100,000 SKUs, and I only want to send the ones that are changed, the new ones that have something that's new that needs to be updated. The other, 90,000 can just stay put. And if I don't do in transit, I would just want to turn that off. No reason to send that. Same with markdowns. If you do markdowns, you send it. If you don't, you don't. This just describes what you're sending to the remote. Same with documents. In documents, do we send receipts down to the stores? Right? That's the big question. Like, if store 2 makes a receiving voucher, it goes to the main, does store 5 need to see store 2's receiving voucher? And probably not, no. But if a customer buys something at store 2 and returns it at store 5, can store 5 see the receipt that was made at store 2? Now, there's an advantage to having that receipt there, isn't there? From a customer service standpoint, it's nice. It also ends up being kind of nice because if you have multiple stores and you have history in all locations and one location goes down, well, you have multiple points where you sort of have that, all your eggs are in one basket, your data is dispersed. But things that might need to go to the store would be receipts potentially and purchase orders, right? Maybe relayed out slips if you're doing transfers. But the rest of that, I don't know that they need to see. Really, up to you. We could talk about it more if anybody had a specific situation or question. And customers, differences mostly. So, so any new customer created at the remote or main will go to the other end, basically, right? Preferences is mostly all have changed, to be honest. We don't pull global or local preferences. Typically, it's dangerous. And then little things like tax, right? That should just go, man. You change the tax area, it should be the same everywhere. We don't play with RPro email. RPro email is ancient. No reason to play with that. Oof. And remote settings, this lets us push down things to the remote. So if I were to change the remote's half of this in here, I could go and say send the station properties down, and it would overwrite their station properties. I could manage their station properties from the main. Pretty exciting. When you process this out, it'll process out once and turn itself off automatically, by the way. In the remote to main side now, again, all the settings here are just mixed in. So here's your customers, your documents, everything all mixed together, but it's the same. You know, customers would be differences. Some of the stuff's weird, like we don't really use doc count, former Z outs. I do usually pull former Z outs. Receipts, pretty much all documents would pull up to the main. So we're talking remote to main. Pretty much all these are going to go. Anyway, that's your basic station file, and that gets set up on both sides. Then, of course, there's three pieces to this polling process. We have right here, actually, process in, process out, and exchange. So basically what happens is that at the main and at the remote, right, a remote store, we make receipts, and then those receipts get processed out, right? They get pushed into a mail bag. While that's going on over here, we open our exchange window to accept a connection. The exchange is initiated from the remote, connects to the main. Data moves over to the main. And then we run a process in over here. Now that happens for all locations. And that first half there is called the get cycle. So all stores drop all their data off. Then the main starts the whole thing over again, going the other direction. We process data out, creating a bunch of mailbags for the remote stores. They initiate a secondary exchange, and the data flows over to the remote store, and they process that data in. Nice. Anyway, you get the idea. That's a complete polling cycle. Now in version 8, there are locks. There are things that go on with the locks that we have to manage. Version 9, they get rid of all that crap, which is nice. So, how we doing here? So we've got the basic station file, basic overview done. Scheduler, yes. In the scheduler, we would normally have all of that kind of stuff set up. We got nothing in this scheduler here at all. But normally we would set these tasks up in the scheduler, and if you haven't set these up and you're setting them up for the first time, I would absolutely have a tech help you because it's easy. We do it all the time. But each of these things would be running a program, and we won't set up all the tasks, but we will set up maybe process out or something. There is different proc outs if you're a main or a remote. So the program name, if we go in here and take a look, would be different. There's a main M or main proc in and a remote proc in or out. So, and mprocout.exe. There's also an rprocout.exe. So main and remote have their own executables, but you schedule it, you do the start in, and then there are no command line parameters for this. So then you'd hop over to schedule and say, you know, daily at whatever time you want it to be, right? Okay, got a task. That's it. So it's up to us to schedule those appropriate tasks. The main has only 3 tasks. It has start the exchange window right here and process in and out. That's all it has. The remote has 4 tasks: process out, exchange, process in. Right? That's the way the tasks go. And there's nowhere where you can see the whole schedule, right? The only place you can see the whole schedule is if you write it down somewhere. So anyway, let's go back into the land of polling. Right, the log, initialize, and common polling solutions. All right, so the log is back on the main menu. We've got a log right here that says what happened. So if we go in here and we say we want to process out, it should create log entries for me. We're still waiting for that thing to go. Yeah, apparently we are. Wow. Oh, nice. It's angry at me because I'm in a 64-bit environment. Fine. So we're not going to get a log file. That's what that tells me right there. Wow, it's really angry, isn't it? Nice. Let's just see what we got going on here. We'll just end task. Probably should have not ran a 64-bit environment on this one, huh? Here we go, rock and roll. So normally the log here would let's see if we go in and do something simple like exchange. Great. Let's back out of here. Let's go look at the log and see if we got anything here at all. Yeah, we got an error, a Windows socket error. That's fine. That's a log, right? I mean, it tells you if you have errors, and that's exactly what happens. A socket error means that the catcher was not ready when the pitcher pitched the ball, basically. So that's a pretty common error, actually. It just means your exchange at the main wasn't running when the remote tried to dial in. So the log is pretty dry. I don't recommend reading it for casual reading, but it's incredibly useful when you're troubleshooting something. And in fact, that exchange error, Windows socket error, is the most common error. Other ones are multiple workstations. If you didn't license your thing right, you could have too many workstations. Last thing I'm going to go over real quick before we call this a day is just initialize and regeneration. And in polling in stations, we have an initialize and a regeneration. Initializing means from the main. So we have a main, we have a remote. We want to take all the files here and move them there. We don't care what's at the remote now. We're going to overwrite the files. That's initialize. So if I had a new store or if I had a broken file in the remote, I would say initialize, and it would hopefully give me a menu, and apparently not, because I guess it's still very angry at me, huh? Yeah, that's what I get for running a 64-bit machine here, huh? Okay, let's try this one more time. There we go. So let's go into stations. Let's click initialize. There we go. Your basic initialize window. You check off which stores and what you want to send. If you check this one here, you get all files, but you may only want like that. You may only want inventory and prices. And if we click OK, it would process that data out, create a mailbag. The next polling cycle, it would go down. We're not going to bother to do that because it will just cause an error in this environment. We've already been down that road. Regenerate goes the other way. So in a regenerate situation, you're sending files probably from here back up to there. So for instance, I run a report at the remote and I say I have whatever, 20K in sales, and I run the same report on the same location for the same time at the main, and only sees 5K in sales. Okay, well, I'm missing some data, right? So I need to regenerate the data. So I would come in here and say, regenerate receipts for whatever date range I want, and then I would click OK, and it would go ahead and process out a mailbag for me and send that data up. That's pretty much what regeneration is. It can also be used if the remote crashes and we want to repopulate the remote with remote's original history. We can repush that too. But anyway, that's pretty much polling. So I want to thank everybody for joining me today, and hopefully it's been beneficial and helpful. And this has been a Big Hairy Dog webinar. My name is Jeff. I will talk to you again. Thanks.